You're listening to The Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, on Alternative Talk, AM 1150. Now, back to the show with local mortgage and finance expert, Tina Mitchell.
Welcome back to The Money Hour with your host and mortgage expert, Tina Mitchell, right here at 1150 AM KKNW, the Saturday, May 5th show. It's a great day to talk money, and that's what you'll receive from listening to the show, how to make money, more money for your family, have a better quality of life. If you're hearing my show at a different time or day, you are listening to a rebroadcast. I say I, but I'm here, we with my co-host.
Thank you.
We're here to answer any questions that you have. You can call the show at 1-855-400-1150 or online at themoneyhour.com. And our first guest in studio, we have John Wilson, our own personal King County assessor. And can anyone still afford to live in Seattle? So, John, thank you so much for joining us in studio here.
Thanks much, Tina. Great to be here.
And a little bit about John. King County Assessor John Wilson was elected in 2015, assumes office having earned the praise of people both inside and outside King County as one of the most innovative, forward-thinking managers in local government. Wilson served as Chief Deputy Assessor for 4 years. His work gained a reputation for savvy development of mobile technology and public-facing solutions that enhance customer service while driving down cost. During his tenure, he rebuilt the department's website, increasing traffic tenfold to nearly 4 million page views a month. Wilson led a team that developed a best-in-class mobile iPad application for field data collection that annually saved hundreds of thousands of dollars to avoid cost. And he spearheaded King County launching the online property tax appeal platform that after 2 years is handling close to 60% of all appeals for the field. And, you know, hearing the bio, little behind the scenes, I mean, this was really needed in the assessor's office to really bring it up to speed of what Seattle has to represent as far as technology. And so for all of us taxpayers, a huge benefit for us because that helps to keep our taxes down when costs are down, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So we're talking about being able to afford to live here in Seattle. So tell us a little bit about your background, John, and what led you to run for the assessor position.
Well, I have a background in and out of both government and the news media, and I largely grew up out here in the Pacific Northwest. You know, I came in and was deputy assessor for 4 years, and it was a operation with a great deal of potential. It needed some fresh leadership that could kind of take it forward, and I was approached by a number of people in the department and elsewhere around the county to step in, so I decided to do it. I love the job, but it's not the easiest of times to be assessor, frankly, Tina.
Yeah.
You know, we've hit people with probably the largest single-year property tax increase most folks have ever seen, and we've been nevertheless trying to look at ways to work with local jurisdictions, work with the legislature and others to make them aware of the impacts of that kind of property tax increase has on, you know, virtually every family here in King County.
John, tell us exactly what does your office do?
So what we're required to do by law are a couple things. One is we set the actual value on every building here in King County. There are roughly 700,000 of them. And that's both residential properties, your home, condominiums and that, but also it's commercial buildings like this one where the studio is, shopping malls and all of that. Those values are then used to calculate what your property tax is. The important thing to understand, though, is we don't actually set the taxes. The local jurisdiction or the state sets the taxes, and then we calculate how much your property tax will be based upon the combination of assessed value and how much money each jurisdiction wants.
Yeah, and you know, and the good news here, because there's always a good news to something that's happening that's challenging. I mean, property values have skyrocketed. So if you look at the why behind taxes are increasing, 46% of our taxes are based on the value of our home, correct? Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's always a good side to everything.
Well, and certainly for those of us that were here during the depths of the kind of downturn,
yes.
Every single part of King County now is above what the pre-2008 level was.
Of course.
And that's frankly a little different than elsewhere around the state and elsewhere around the country, where there are some parts of the country that still haven't come back up to the pre-recessionary levels. So the good news for people is that the equity you have in your home
yes.
is both been restored and is expanding. And that's something that gives you some flexibility.
Yeah, of course. So, John, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing our region that relates to the job that you do?
I think part of it is we've got to have the difficult conversation about what's the limit to the property tax, and what's the impact. I mean, you raised it at the very onset, Tina. Can people afford to live in King County anymore? And sadly, week by week goes by where I hear somebody who's got a story of, I'm not sure I can stay in my house anymore. Most of them are really kind. They say, Mr. Wilson, I'm not mad at you, but I got your bill, and oh my God, and how am I going to pay for this? And we have a senior exemption program that we've tried to market very aggressively. Some people don't qualify for it. One option for them is to talk to mortgage folks like you and say, can I refinance my house, or can I get
look at doing a reverse mortgage?
Yeah, or something that would give me some wiggle room for the time being. But the great challenge is we have such a narrow tax base, and we now have a sales tax that's at more than 10% here in King County, and then a property tax. Across the county, the average was about a 17% increase. But we have, for example, the little community of Carnation. Its property taxes went up more than 31%.
Wow.
And, that's simply not sustainable. So we've got to figure out how we modernize our tax system.
Wow. Well, so we established that taxes have gone up dramatically this year. Why is that, John?
Well, the principal reason, about 2/3 of the tax increase people saw this year, came from what's called the McCleary decision, which was the legislature responding to a Supreme Court ruling on how do you fund public education as the paramount duty of the state. And they totally changed how we do property taxes and added then a special statewide education levy to it. Now, the eventual notion is that local school levies would be phased out. But this year in particular, you're paying all those local levies and this new state education levy. So that's really what's hammered taxpayers.
So, John, we've talked a little bit about maybe some options for people that are struggling. Possibly refinance might be a challenge if they're struggling paying their taxes to be able to qualify for a refinance. Reverse mortgage might really be a great option, great product for the right people. What other suggestions would you have for people that are struggling paying their property taxes?
I think first and foremost would be to get a hold of our office and see whether you might qualify for the senior exemption.
Because what was that
program.
Percentage you said before that people actually are missing out on it because they don't even know that it exists?
Right. So there's probably about 20% of the homeowners in the county that might well qualify for it. And we know that, depending upon what your income level is, the qualification steps are really simple. Just really three. You got to be obviously the owner occupant of the home, age 61 and older, and have a household income of $40,000 a year or less. Now that's tough in King County because a lot of people, if both of you are retired, may well have just in Social Security more than $40,000.
Yeah.
But then we give you a freeze on your property value and a discount on that, and that can help a lot of folks. There's also a deferral program if you don't mind having a lien. Now, that raises the income level to $45,000, but basically what the state does is the state repays us the difference between what your discounted value is and what it would be at full rate, but then it has a lien attached to your property so that when you sell it, that lien gets paid off. We generally, frankly, try to steer people toward the exemption program because it's a straight-off reduction in taxes without any kind of lien on the property.
Now, on top of property taxes raising dramatically, home prices and rents also rose dramatically. Do increases in property taxes play a role in that?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the interesting things, especially I think in the rental sector, is a lot of people who rent, and in, for example, Seattle now it has become a majority rental market, is they sort of assume, well, I don't pay property taxes. Oh, yes, you do. It may not be a line item in your monthly rental check, but the fact is that goes into the calculation of what any landlord, big or small, is going to figure out what they have to charge you for that rental unit. So you are indeed trying to pay property taxes as well.
So, John, as you know, I do a lot of work with the homeless community, and actually today I have a keynote for the Hoff Foundation. They have their big event where they're doing a Queen for the Day. They take 18 homeless women off the street that get pampered all day long, and just an amazing event.
Oh, how cool.
And I know homelessness is a huge issue here, especially in our Seattle market. How do you involvement in looking for answers to assist there?
So we've been doing a couple things. First and foremost, as I mentioned, we cover some 700,000 pieces of property in King County. We have data on all that: who owns it, how big it is, what's it being used for, is it vacant, is it being utilized, and that. Part of what we've done over the last year or two is we've identified, in particular, publicly owned pieces of property owned by like the state or the universities or King County or a city like Seattle or Bellevue and that. And found those pieces of property that are either surplus or underutilized. And we've been trying to do some matchmaking with nonprofit agencies to help them look at whether they can use some of that property. There are also cases where buildings that are vacant now can be repurposed, at least on a short-term basis, and used as long as there's some monitoring of it and that, so that it's not vandalized and that. So we've done that, and then we're looking at other ways to try to find some opportunities to provide some tax relief to homeowners and renters to make it so that we create more affordable housing, or at least we preserve more of the affordable housing that's already out there.
So, John, can local officials solve the issue relating to homelessness and housing affordability, or is it really, do we need help from Olympia?
Well, I think it's some of all. I mean, there are some things with state law that could be done. There are some that have already been done. This past session, we got one provision that will allow utilities such as Seattle City Light that buy property with ratepayer money. Normally, they've had to get full market value for it, even if they're selling it for a nonprofit purpose like housing. We now got legislation passed that will allow them to enter into a negotiated sale of that property. And we've got actually a couple city light sites in Seattle we've identified that could be used for housing. And that will dramatically cut the cost of building affordable housing, and we'll open up some new avenues where we can do that. There's some other things that we can do at the state level. We've also, though, just as a community, we've got to get smarter about how do we increase supply. I mean, Tina, you touched on it one of the things we're struck by is, especially in the residential market, almost all sales these days are in a bid situation.
Yes.
You very seldom see
crazy bid situation.
Yeah.
So, new stuff that's happening over at the assessor office. Anything new?
So,
what exciting's going on?
One of the things that you'll see here, especially, we did a sort of soft launch of it this last month, but in August and in November, when ballot measures are on the ballot now going forward, we have developed and have online what we call a taxpayer transparency tool. You know, I used to get frustrated because the way we normally describe how much is that tax increase going to be is it gets reflected in how many lattes it's at. You know, and
well, that's important.
Well, it is, but you know, I find that when I get my tax bill, I go, "Oh my God, I had 167 lattes this month, and man, am I buzzed!"
True to Seattle.
But we said, can't we give people a better idea of what it's actually going to cost them, not in lattes, but in dollars? And so what this transparency tool does is it allows you through mapping to go to a piece of property. You can go to your property or your neighbor's, click on it, and it'll say, here's what's on the ballot, here's what it's going to cost you. Click and decide whether you want to pay that or that, and then see how it adjusts your taxes and that. And we want to put in the taxpayers' hands some firsthand information to let them make a better decision.
Are there any new levies that are of interest to share?
Well, we'll have a couple of them. It looks like the city of Seattle needs to renew its education and families levy, and Mayor Durkin has also talked about adding her proposal for 2 years of college to that. That could be a significant levy in the city of Seattle. Countywide, at some juncture this year, we will probably have to renew what's called the automatic fingerprint system, identification system, AFIS, and that will be across King County. And then there may be some other jurisdictions that will have ballot measures come either August or November.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, and Keelan, great question, because a lot of times people aren't really aware that the levies you're voting for has over 50% of your taxes are because of those levies. So you really need to pay attention to what you're voting for. So, John, thank you for coming in and joining us.
Thanks much for
again.
having me. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, John.
And coming up next in the Money Hour, closing the sale, Nikki Rush, your sales maven, right here on 1150 AM KKNW after the short break.